Hello, Catherine. You're the first to join. I think we're a bit early though. You all right, Dexter? All right, I can't see everybody when I'm in full screen mode. And Mike, not sure if you're here.
I am too.
Oh, there you are. Yeah, when I'm in full screen mode, I can't see who's here.
Right.
But if you could let me know when to start, I'm all ready.
Okay. Yeah, you've made it live. So Alexander, I'll get you to go off camera and mute yourself until showtime. And Dan, I will let you just introduce yourself because I think you will do a better job than I will. And
Oh yeah, it's
then
part of my presentation.
yeah, and I see people just filing in now. So we just got out of Fran's session. It was a little tight. So people might need a bathroom break in between. Sorry about that, folks. The intention of doing 20-minute slots and a 30-minute slot is we have a little time for pee breaks, but that does not seem to be the case. We're using up all the minutes tonight, which has been fabulous.
But what a great presentation though. That was really powerful. That was amazing.
Yeah, it was so good.
Yeah.
All right, friend, I'm going to duck off of here and I'll leave you to sort of watch the attendee count when that stops.
Okay, I can't really see the attendee count because I'm in full screen mode in my presentation here. So
I'll hang tough with you then and welcome, friends. Maybe drop. Oh, you know what? As I say, drop a note. I'm going to have to make sure that the chat is enabled. Drop a note and say hello to Daniel.
Yeah, Mike, I can't see the chat either when I'm in full screen mode. I don't know why, but
that's fine. Then say hi to Mike.
Hi, Mike. Like you, Mike, or the other Mike?
Any Mike.
Any Mike?
They can just say hi to a random Mike.
Oh, you know what? It pops up when it comes up here. I see it.
There you go.
All right. It was hiding because I was in full screen mode.
There you go. But, yeah, I figured as much. I just thought let's get everybody engaged. Harold says hi, Dan. Kara, hey, Daniel.
Oh, Mike, great.
Evening. So we got a few mics.
Oh, that's great. Some of my classmates are here too. That's fantastic.
Nice.
Oh, thanks. This is great. I'll put this over here.
Danilo. Nice, nice, nice. All right, sir. I will leave you to it. And Las Vegas. Mike from Las Vegas. I'm Mike from Canmore, if anybody gets that right.
It's same. All mics are cool no matter where you're from.
There you go. I don't know. Right now, I'm looking out the window and there's snow, so I'm thinking
I know,
Las
right?
Vegas is probably a better bet. All right,
All
Daniel,
right.
I'll let you do
Okay.
your thing, and thank you again for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Mike. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. My name is Dan Sundahl. I'm going to be talking today about post-traumatic growth. Now, there are a couple of disclaimers I need to share with you during my presentation. I'm going to show you lots of original artwork. All the artwork is my own artwork. It's original art pieces, and I use them to express my own recovery with mental health. I do use angels and demons to represent trauma and recovery. And sometimes people don't really like that. They don't like devils in artwork. They don't like what it represents, but you're going to see a lot of it in the artwork that I create. Now, a lot of the images I'm going to show you, they are based on emergency services calls that I've done, but none of them are of actual photographs at that moment. And the process for my creating this artwork is something is in my head that I have to get out. I think about it and the image pops into my head, and then I stage it with my peers, and then I photograph it and digitally draw and paint on top of that photograph is how I get it out of my head. So I just want to give you a little bit of a warning. Now, for those of you that are in emergency services, or even not really, because this really is authentic to me, and I need to be authentic to myself when I create this artwork, which means I don't censor it. I don't think what are people gonna feel when they see it. Because of that, and based on your own experiences, this may be triggering for you. I just wanted to put that out there. This is an art piece I did, which represents this presentation. And I am going to focus on post-traumatic growth. And when you look at this image, it's a beautiful cherry blossom tree. This image represents the idea of being tragically optimistic, overall optimism. So you look at it first glance, it's this beautiful tree. The bulldog is me. There's nature through the tree. There's fairies going through it. The lemur here, see if I can get my pointer on. Pointer options, laser. So this little guy here, in retrospect, after creating the image, I realized it looks like he's taking a pee. That wasn't my intent, but he is my protector, and he can see my danger. And if you look over here, there's a man hanging on a noose, which represents suicide. So when you first look at this image, it looks beautiful. It's optimistic, which is the overall intent, but it's also tragic in some ways. And that's the purpose of my presentation, is to be tragically optimistic. But in order to be optimistic, I need to acknowledge the tragedies as well. So I'm going to embellish on that a little bit, but again, I'm going to focus on the optimism and the recovery and the post-traumatic growth. So here's a couple art pieces that I did of my fire hall. I'm in Leduc. I was a paramedic firefighter for 20 years full-time in the city of Leduc, and it was a pretty good place to work. We worked 24 hours on, and then we're off for 24 hours. Then we were 24 hours off, and then we were on for another 24 hours. Then we're off for 5 days. So it was a 8-day cycle, and it was a really good schedule. 24 hours on the fire truck on the ambulance was pretty rough, but it only meant that 24 hours on the ambulance we only did that a few times a month. So it was it was good for us that way. Anyways, so here's a few images of our fire hall that I created. And one day we were sent to go talk to can you guys hear me? It feels like my microphone just turned off. Can someone put a little?
No, you're good.
Are you good? Okay. Just the hearing of my thing sounded like my mic turned off. We were told to go listen to the psychologist talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. And I was on shift, and we went. All of us were like, oh, we got to go listen to this guy talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. And we went, and this psychologist was talking about the signs and symptoms. At the time, I never thought that I had PTSD, because I never had that one call that I thought I was different after. And that's how I thought PTSD worked, it was normal. I was normal. And then you have that one call. And then after that one call, then you're impaired. And I never felt that I had that one call. So I never thought that I had PTSD. And then the psychologist mentioned the fact that many of his clients he diagnosed with PTSD over a long career of continuous stressors, which is what happened to me. And as he's going through all these signs and symptoms, I really related to all of them. And when I went back to the fire hall after this presentation and we were cooking dinner, I asked the guys in my platoon and they said, "Hey, do you guys relate to any of this stuff?" And they said, "No." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, me not either. Of course not." The next day I made a phone call, made an appointment. And to my surprise, I was diagnosed with PTSD. So these are the symptoms that I had. Now, these are not evidence-based. This isn't, well, some of it isn't what's in the DSM-5, but these are my own experiences, or the experiences that I had suffering from trauma that I didn't realize that I was experiencing. So sleep disorder, really hard time sleeping, hard time falling asleep, hard time staying asleep. I could only sleep for 4 to 6 hours. I couldn't sleep more than 6 hours. And what I'm learning now, sleep is lack of sleep is very detrimental to mental health. I became very apathetic. I stopped caring for the things I used to care about. I used to ride my motorbike a lot with my buddies. I didn't want to do that anymore. It was like joy was emptying from my life. I became very withdrawn. So at the fire department, when we would be cooking dinner, we did all our training, we did the calls, we had some downtime, we would socialize, and I didn't want to do that. I would retreat to my room, and I didn't want to hang out with the rest of my platoon. And that turned into social isolation. So at home, I didn't want to go on dates with my wife. I didn't want to go out for dinners. I started to feel that I didn't like people. But what was really happening was I felt vulnerable, and I didn't want to go out in public. I didn't feel safe. And I masked that as being, um, I just don't like people is what I would tell myself. My coping mechanism was food. So for me, it was sugar. For many people, they turn to drugs and alcohol, but for me, sugar is what made me feel better. And I gained a lot of weight, which is very difficult when you're an active paramedic firefighter, to be gaining so much weight. It really affected my work, but that was the one thing that made me feel a little bit better. I didn't realize that the traumatic experiences I had could have physical manifestations. I was at work. I was training my EMT partner how to put on a 12 lead, and which is stickies that you put on your chest, and we can use it to evaluate if someone is having a heart attack. And we can look at the electrical flow over the myocardium, because the electricity moves differently over dead heart tissue. So I showed him how to do it, and I analyzed my own 12 lead, and I was showing signs of a heart attack. And I was having numbness in my left arm, which is another sign of a myocardial infarction. So I thought I was having a heart attack. Went to the hospital. There's a cardiologist there. They did the 12, and I'm like, "Yes, you have ST elevation and 2,3 AVNF." And they tested me, and the cardiologist said, "No, you're not having a heart attack. You're a Scandinavian Danish guy. And sometimes stocky guys, they just have what's called early repolarization." So I wasn't having a heart attack. But then I asked, why was I having this numbness in my arm? And he says, "I don't know." But what I realized later is once I found out what was happening to me mentally, that numbness went away. So I wasn't aware that the stresses from my life at the time were starting to manifest itself in physical ways. My fuse got really short and it burned really hot. So I got really, really angry, and I got really, really angry easily. Again, not realizing this was a symptom of trauma. I thought it was my wife's fault. I thought it was my friend's fault. I thought it was my supervisor's fault. I thought it was my coworker's fault. I never thought that it was me. And that got me into a lot of trouble, both at work and at home. I was senior paramedic. I'm an advanced cardiac life support instructor. I'm a pediatric advanced life support instructor. I was a clinical educator. I was the senior guy at our fire department, where other paramedics would come and say, "Hey, Dan, can you check this call for us? We want to evaluate, and we want your opinion on it." But over time, I'd say probably 10 years in, my confidence started to drop, which really affected my ability to do my job. Again, none of these symptoms I realized were because of the traumatic experience I was having in my life. I would be overcome with emotion. So for no reason, apparently to me at the time, I would just start crying, and I didn't know why. Now, of course, all the things I'm learning in school about trauma and how the body reacts, this is all making sense to me now, and I'm self-evaluating and analyzing myself as I'm getting more education. But essentially, my emotions were held down for so long because I was being a toxic positivist, which is the opposite of a tragic optimist, um, of a, these emotions just started bubbling up over because they had no place else to go. And I'd be driving home and I'd start to cry. I'd be paying for groceries and I'd start to cry. And I really didn't know why. Again, no idea why this was happening to me. My sex drive dropped to 0, which of course caused a lot of issues with me at home. My wife, of course, felt that I didn't love her. I didn't desire her. And she would challenge me on that. And because my fuse was short, I would get really angry. So of course she felt she wasn't loved. And then I felt that she wasn't supportive. So it really started this downward spiral in our relationship. I would have invasive thoughts. My wife was a yoga teacher. Well, she still is a yoga teacher. And she is actually certified in yoga for trauma. So she would tell me the things that she's learned, and I would try to relax my mind and try to meditate. But when I did that, all this weird stuff would come into my head. It was like when my conscious defenses were down, all this weird, horrifying things would enter my mind and it would jolt me awake. My memory started to get affected. I forgot what my protocols were. I would forget what my drug dosages were. Drug dosages that I've done hundreds of times that would just automatically come, they were gone. And again, what I'm learning now of where the memory centers are in the brain and how affected they are to the amygdala, that I can see how that, I know now how that was affecting my memory. I was being disassociated. And what this felt like was I was beside myself. And what I've learned is that I was actually trying to escape myself is what was happening. An example of that would be if in the back of the ambulance, it would feel like I was doing a ride along with myself, or I would be somewhere that was really, that I've been to lots of like area in my house. And it would be, I would recognize it, but it wouldn't seem familiar. I would be disassociating. I wouldn't be connected to myself. When things were really bad, I would have auditory and visual hallucinations. I would hear and see things. Because I was hypervigilant all the time, my acuity to hearing changed. So I'd be always listening for danger, which is a different zone of listening. And I never got out of that. So I was very sensitive to birds, to babies crying, to sirens, to horns honking. And it was like needles in my brain all the time. I started to get very anxious when I would hear things that sounded like my radio, or if I saw things on TV that were in emergency situations. Instead of getting excited, I would start to feel really anxious. I would start to feel really depressed. Mostly in the morning, I'd wake up and just have this big, heavy feeling of depression. And I eventually started having thoughts of death and dying. I wasn't thinking of suicide at this point, but I would go to work and think, okay, if I die in a house fire today, I'm not going to try to rescue myself. Or if I get attacked in the back of the ambulance by someone who's violent, I'm not going to defend myself. And when I think of it now and how these symptoms snuck up on me, I didn't realize that these were maladaptive behaviors. And eventually that turned to suicide. So I had a suicide plan. And this is how trauma altered my brain so much. This is my thought processes were that if I killed myself, then I would be okay. That's what I thought. I thought, yeah, I just don't want to feel this way anymore. I just don't want to, I don't know how to get away from it because it was constant. In the evening, it was worse because my defenses were down. And I thought, you know what? I'll kill myself and then I'll be okay. Now, when I look back on it, that's really scary. I didn't know there was anything wrong with me. I never reached out for help because I didn't know. Here's an art piece called The Thirsty Horse that I did. So the horse is me and it's dying and it's at its peer support, but I didn't know to ask for help because I had my solution. And my trauma is on top, blinding me, convincing me, oh, you don't need you have your solution. Just practice your solution and you'll be okay. That's what happened to the neural pathways in my brain. That when I think back on it now, it's pretty scary. So here I am. I'm got probably early 50s. This started happening about 10 years ago. Oh, late mid 40s, I guess. And my brain I didn't really know what was happening to me. And this is kind of how a self-portrait at that time, where my brain was like just this storm. And as a man in emergency services, a senior paramedic firefighter, I really didn't know what to do. I didn't know to ask for help because I thought this was normal. The last thing I wanted to do was to reach out for help, to admit what was happening to me. And I didn't, there's a lot of shame around that. I've tried to do a lot of research on depression and anxiety for men specifically. And there were lots of things came up, but this study came up, which I found really interesting. And I think it's relative to the point of why perhaps men don't seek counseling, or why men, it's not one of the first things we want to do. And so here's a study that was a meta-analysis of 110 different studies. It involved over 24,000 people over a 10-year span from 2011 to 2021. And across all 110 eligible studies, males represented only 26% of the participants. And this is specific to depression. None of the studies reported any explicit attempt to increase the involvement of men through targeted strategies. And 19 studies explicitly recruited females only, whilst 2 others consisted of 100% female sample despite allowing men to participate. So why is this? Why it's difficult to find men-specific studies? And why is it that men don't regularly seek counseling? And as a counseling student myself, I'll be graduating this year as a registered counseling therapist. Why is this the case? And how can I convince men to come to counseling? So it's something that I've thought of. Here's the QR code. If you want to actually see that full report, you can take a picture of that with your phone, and that study will actually come up, and you can read the whole study. It's very interesting. So here I am. I am feeling okay. I'm telling everyone when I wake up in the morning that I'm putting my okay suit on, but I look confident. Here's an art piece I did of a medic in England when I was there, and he looks very confident, yet he's surrounded by his trauma. And I call this the false okay. And here are some other pictures that represent that time in my life where I was pretending that I was okay. I thought that I was fine. And now that I look back and I'm learning a lot about trauma and how the brain works, I recently created this piece where I really became attached to my trauma because I had it for so long. I would ask myself, okay, well, if I don't have these feelings, then who am I? I started to lose my identity of who I was before I was a paramedic, before I had these traumatic symptoms. That's who I became. And I have read research on this, and it really is a detriment and a big roadblock to people in their recovery, because the thought of getting better scares the crap out of them, because then who are they? So that's another area I want to focus on, is really helping people through that difficult time. I have a friend, Dr. Olivia Johnson from the Blue Wall Institute. And although I felt that I was fooling everybody that I was okay, while at the same time having a plan to kill myself and feeling that nobody ever knew, there were significant signs that I was in trouble, even though I wouldn't admit it myself. So Dr. Johnson, what she does is she is one of the few people in the world that can do an autopsy on suicide. So she formed the Blue Wall Institute, and she has investigated thousands of law enforcement suicides. And she has come up with 10 common factors that she calls the fatal 10 that are similar elements that are common in these men and women who die by suicide. And I read her research, I read her textbooks, and although she is specific at that time to law enforcement, it's very applicable to many people, not only in emergency services. So these are the fatal 10. This is from the 10th most common to the most common. So many of these men and women had other major life events or situations going on, like a divorce, like moving, like career changes. They were all mostly pending or nearing retirement. Or I think it could be because of that identity factor again. If I'm not a firefighter, if I'm not a paramedic, if I'm not a man doing this job, then who am I? And that scares people to the point of potentially being a contributing factor. Many of them were under investigation, were under investigation. They had firearm access. They had medical issues like diabetes, or they had high blood pressure, or they had weight problems. They had mental health concerns, so they were worried about their mental health. They had sleep disturbances. They had cumulative trauma and stress, like I did. They had substance abuse and addiction issues. And the number one most common factor in these men and women who die by suicide are interpersonal relationship issues. So for me, as a counseling therapist that is going to specialize in people suffering from trauma, I'm going to focus on interpersonal relationship issues, secondary to trauma, substance abuse and addiction, secondary to trauma, evaluate the stresses and the trauma in their life, and evaluate their sleep disturbances, all secondary to trauma, with hopefully intervene somehow and prevent suicide. So I see these as warning signs. And for me, walking around trying to pretend and fake everybody, even to myself, that I was fine, I had 7 of these out of 10. So it was pretty clear. Luckily for me, I saw that psychologist talk and realized, holy smokes, I guess killing myself isn't the answer. Got diagnosed and started my treatment plan. So here I am on one side of the bridge, and I need to cross that bridge and face my demon, so to speak. So what was my solution? So my solution was creating this artwork. And now that I've realized how that is happening in my brain biologically, it makes sense to me. But at the time, I thought it was a horrible idea. My psychologist says, Dan, why don't we do this? And you can process these emotions and feelings you're having through the artwork that you're already creating. And I was doing pictures of landscapes and pictures of my bulldogs and that kind of stuff. But I thought it was a horrible idea. I'm like, no, I want you to give me a pill so I can forget this stuff so that I can go back to work. And he goes, Dan, it doesn't work that way. You need to step into this stuff in order to process it. I'm like, okay, I'll try. So these are the very first images that I did. Right. So here's a paramedic that has gloved hands on his head. First, that's disgusting. There's a dead body. There's a ghost. I did not plan on sharing this with anybody because of the shame I had. What are not only my fellow paramedics and firefighters, but what are the people that I worked with going to think of? Even when I had my friends pose for this picture, my fellow firefighters, I didn't tell them why I was doing it. I says, hey guys, I have this really cool idea. Can we just do this? And they thought it was weird that I posed them this way. And I didn't show it to them. I didn't share it with anybody for a really long time. And here's some other ones that I just didn't share, but it was very therapeutic for me. So what was happening in my brain is I would have these constant negative traumatic neural pathways that would happen that would affect my thoughts and my feelings and my emotions, and I have these physical responses. And when I create this artwork, I'm able to access a different part of my brain to interfere with that automatic process that was happening. So when I was finished, I was able to have the memory, but not have the emotional response to it. So this was what helped me recover. I was able to process these feelings in a different way and put them in a different part of my brain and interrupt the years and years and years of traumatic pathways that were ingrained in my neurobiology through being creative and accessing the creative part of my brain. When you look at this picture, super duper duper sad. And this represents the many calls I've been on with sudden infant death syndrome. However, when I look at this picture, it makes me happy because the spirit of this baby is smiling, reaching up for me, and is happy. And that's how I actually changed my memory of these calls. And when I was finished this, that's how I remember them now. So I was really able to reach back and go through all these calls and change how I remembered them. Over time, I started having this existential crisis with death. And so that started to surface in a lot of my artwork, and I started to implement the Grim Reaper in a lot of my images because death really wasn't what I thought it was. I thought death was this horrible thing that happened, and it was against something I was fighting against all the time. But I learned over time that it's not the worst thing that can happen to people. This is called behind the scenes. So the Grim Reaper's here, sitting here. Here's an angel over here with her hand on the shoulder of the paramedic that's about to capture the airway. And here is the spirit of the patient who was screaming because he can see the Grim Reaper and the angel. Meanwhile, the paramedics we're doing our job, trying to save this kid. And the reason I created this is because I feel energy stuff when it happens, which could be why I was so susceptible to the effects of trauma maybe in the first place. But I delivered 9 babies in the back of the ambulance. And when that happens, I can feel a change. When people die, when I'm there, I can feel an energy change. And I wanted to express that. And that's why this image is here. Here's the Grim Reaper behind the nurse. The Grim Reaper knows its time. The spirit of the nurse knows its time. The spirit of the patient knows its time. He's trying to unplug his own life support. Meanwhile, the family is begging us to keep the patient alive. And I struggled with that a lot in my career. This is called death notification, and there's a lot to be said about doing proper death notifications, which I never really learned in school, but I learned a lot after with help from my friend, Dr. Alexander Jabber, who has a course on proper death notifications. And if you look over here, the Grim Reaper is coming in the door to collect the soul, which is here, as the paramedic is giving a proper death notification to the family. This is in Finland, and in Finland I had a great time. This is in Poland. And in Poland, this is in Warsaw. I had a great time with the paramedics there. They have free education there, so there's highly educated. One of these medics has a doctorate, the other one has a master's. And this is called the in-between, where they checking the pulse and the Grim Reaper is there waiting, not looking as mean and angry as he used to look in my art pieces. Again, here's another one from Poland when they defibrillate the patient. Here's a picture that I recently did, capturing an image that was early on in my career about this family. And I'm not going to get into it, but as sad as this looks, this image brings me a lot of peace because this little girl is happy. She's an angel and she's playing with her toy. This is the original image that I did about that same incident. And again, it looks really sad, but for me, it changed how I remember these memories and how I recall them and where I put them in my brain. So images like this actually bring me peace and happiness, really. And it makes me remember the incident in a completely different way. So artwork is one of the things that really was a large component on helping me process these complex emotions and feelings and filing them away and putting them in a safe place. Another big thing for me is my bulldog. So this is Dexter. So I rescued Dexter, and sometimes I feel like he rescued me, but I'm definitely a bulldog guy. And I don't know what they say about if you look like I'm definitely not a poodle guy. Not that I do like poodles, don't get me wrong, but I don't know what it is if I was genetically predisposed to liking bulldogs because of the way I look. But Dexter, he can sense when I have a bad day or a good day, and he really reacts to that. So for me, animals therapy is a big part of my recovery. So now I am in this post-traumatic growth phase, which I had no idea what it was. And I've realized it's this gold lining around this dark cloud when we talk about PTSD and suicide and death. And by rewiring my brain and doing this therapy and essentially changing how my brain worked, I became a different person. I'm actually better because of my trauma. So the definition is a positive psychological change as a result of adversity in order to rise to a higher level of functioning. And here's a graph adapted from O'Leary and Nikovics back in 1995. So the idea is that you're here, and this is based on that one tragic event. Like I had this one call or this one event or this one experience, and now I'm impaired. The idea is we want to recover. The quicker we can recover is based on our resiliency. But by changing your brain, doing the work, rewiring it, we can actually become different and end up here. Now, realistically, this is what my graph looks like. Many adverse events. So I gradually became impaired. And I'm not this super post-traumatic growth rock star all the time where this line is just above my previous recovery line all the time. I still have ups and downs, but now I can recognize them. And I have the tools that I know work for me that I can change my perception of how I'm feeling. Here's an art piece I did for a police officer in Calgary where she's looking in this kintsugi bowl, which is a Japanese art form where they take this clay pot and they smash it. And then they rebuild it with this gold lacquer. And the idea is that this repaired pot has more beauty and more character because of the damage and repair than it did before it was it was damaged in the first place. And I thought that was a great analogy for post-traumatic growth. So here she is looking in this empty kintsugi bowl while this fiery phoenix grows out of her back. So if we go back to this picture about the false okay of how I used to feel, I replaced it with this picture, which is how I feel now, where now I have this warrior behind me because of the work that I've done. And I've replaced that trauma with this warrior that I feel that I just feel so much better and more powerful than I did before because my brain is different, because I did the work to change my brain. A big part of my recovery was perception. So when I went to therapy, my psychologist really worked on how I perceive things and how I saw things. And we learn a lot about that in school with cognitive restructuring and reframing and cognitive distortions. For me, I couldn't see the forest amongst the tree because my tree was on fire. So I really had a hard time looking past the hand in front of my face, really. So for me, big parts of my recovery, which I still try to maintain, are changes in my self-perception or who I identify with, changes in my perspectives on life or my worldview, and then my changes in my relationships. So by changing my perceptions of how I see things, and I'll get into a little bit about cognitive behavioral therapy, where our thoughts determine our emotions, which determine our behaviors. Changing how we think, for me, was a big part of my recovery. So here are other things that I did. Again, this isn't best practice. This isn't what you're supposed to do. This is what I personally did to get better. I had to get help. Just like busting your femur, you can't walk that off. And I wanted to. Trust me, I was hoping I was just going to go away because I didn't want to ask for help, because that meant that I needed to admit that something was wrong. And that was a really hard step for me to do. I had to take that conscious decision to take my life back, like that paramedic crossing that bridge and facing my trauma. I felt for the longest time that I would just get better over time. But what happened was the next day just got worse and worse and worse. So I had to make that realization and decide, okay, I need to do something. It's not going to get better on its own. This is weird for a firefighter and paramedic to say, but I really had to analyze my attachment to my job and make the realization that my job is not who I am. When I do this lecture at firefighter conferences, I wince when I say this, and like the crowd gasp, like, what? Like, how can you not identify with your job as your firefighter? Because that's what you are. But that was the problem. I would take my job home with me, and the effects from who I identified with would be there. I have to devote my energy to where it matters. And now is actually quite difficult to do, because often I would start to ruminate in negative thoughts, and that would stay with me all day, and I wouldn't recognize that it was happening. And once I realized where to put my energy, then things started to change. An example of that, and which is why I created this picture, was I would be at work and I would be hyper sensitive and put my energy into the weirdest things at work, like changing our chairs or changing our IV catheters. Yet at home, when my wife would ask me, what should we do? What color should we paint the cabinets? I would say, I don't want to make any decisions. You just decide. I would put zero energy when I went home. And of course, that caused a lot of problems. So I had to be aware of where my energy was going. I have to limit my exposures to stressors. So I made a list of all the things that stressed me out, and I made a list of things that I could release myself from. And then I was left with the stressors that I couldn't release myself from. And one of my favorite theories is the radical acceptance theory, which is 4 steps. And this kind of applies to any issue or decision that you have. You have 4 options, really. 1, you can change the situation that you're in. So for me at work, if things were stressful at work, and at work sometimes, I would let my officers know, like, hey, can we try these things instead? It might be more effective. And if they thought it was good, then they would change it. If that didn't work, step 2 was learn to live with it. And this is cognitive restructuring, or seeing how I perceive it. Try to be that duck where the water comes off the back if I couldn't change the situation. The third option is leave. So leave the relationship, leave that job. And the fourth option, which I was doing for a long time, was do nothing and suffer the consequences. So when I had my list of stressors that I couldn't release myself from, I applied that theory and did the best that I could. I used my sick time. I never took advantage of my sick time at work. I'd never called in sick thinking, I just don't want to go to work today. But I did use my sick time at work. If I felt that I wouldn't be an effective paramedic firefighter, because I was having a mentally bad day. I made sure that I used my sick time. I don't listen to slow, sucky, emotional music. Sometimes I do. Don't tell anybody, but I'm a bit of a Swiftie, and I really do like some slow, sucky Taylor Swift music. And sometimes I'll listen to that when I'm trying to be really creative, right? Then it kind of makes the creative juices flow. However, if I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling really crappy, I am not going to put on any emotional, sucky Taylor Swift music. I have a specific playlist that I have if I'm feeling depressed when I wake up. And I really like actually BBC Radio 2. I like that station and I stream it through my Sonos speakers. It's usually really uplifting. There's no commercials and it just makes me feel good and happy when I listen to it. I'm not sure why. So for me, music really has a profound effect on my emotional state. Diet is probably the most profound change in my mental health, even more so than my artwork or talk therapy. For me, changing my diet cured my depression. Now, I'm not saying that everyone should do this or that everyone should consider changing their diet. This is what I did. And the more I educate myself, and I'm taking further training in it from experts in this field of metabolic psychiatry, of what this actually means and how to change your brain biology. So I am a strict carnivore. I don't eat any fruits or vegetables. I don't eat any sugar. I don't eat any carbs. I fuel my body on fats. And it changed me more than anything else has ever changed me. And I'm not saying everyone should do this, but for me, this had an amazingly profound effect on my mental health. So I'm really educating myself on the biology and how to introduce that for clients if they want it so that I can best help them that way. I strive to be a better version of myself. So I have a Daniel 2.0 version of me. And when I'm in a situation where what do? I say, what would Daniel 2.0 do? What would a better version of me do? And the answer comes in. And then I just do that. And then eventually I just become that guy. The problem is that's a flip side to that, where if I wake up in the morning and think I'm a piece of shit every day, then that's what I'm going to become. And that's why I created this art piece. So I ask myself, am I walking my trauma today, or is my trauma walking me? And I make sure that I am cognizant of that, of what's my state right now? What position am I in? And just by acknowledging that has made a really big difference for me. I practice honor and integrity, not for the benefit of other people, but it gives me purpose and it gives me guidance. Japanese warriors in the 1600s, the samurai, they followed a code called Bushido. And they did it because their lives were so violent that by following this code, it gave them purpose and it gave them guidance. So I've tried to do that myself, and it's helped quite a bit. I have to be vulnerable. I have to be honest to myself. I have to be truthful to myself. And sometimes that's really scary. When I create my artwork, if I start creating the artwork for other people, then it's not going to be beneficial for me. And people will recognize that. So I really need to be vulnerable in order for it to benefit myself. And we could talk about self-actualizations and cores and values, but a big part of me in being that way is to be honest and truthful to myself. And that means being vulnerable. I'm not alone. I realized that when I did decide to share that artwork with my peers and other emergency workers, I realized that many others would look at my artwork and attach their own experiences to it, which made me feel great. Here's an image I did at the beginning of COVID when people were sending me all their selfies. And this made me feel like I'm really not alone. This is 1,000 portraits. It's 67 different countries. It's 1,310 people. There's a dog in here. We all look the same. So we're all wearing masks. We're all wearing protective equipment during COVID. And that really made me feel like I'm not alone. And so I painted each one of these. It has the city and the country that they're from. And you can get this for free on my website. You can download a 40 by 60 version of it, 60-inch version of it. And lots of emergency services places have done that because it really gives a sense of togetherness when things were really tough for COVID for emergency workers. So as I travel and I get to meet many people and I ask them, what are some of the things that you do that makes you feel better, that makes you recover? What are your coping mechanisms? And I add them to the list. So again, this isn't best practice. This isn't what we should do. This is what people have told me when I travel, what they do to get better or feel better. And if you can feel these, if there's something on here that I didn't include that you think I should include, then send me a message and I'll add it in here. All right, so critical incident stress management. And again, this is specific for emergency services because that's who I talk to. But CISM is a program that happens as a result of events that happen. There's a program where people diffuse and they debrief and they kind of offload and process some of those stressors. So a lot of places in North America do that. I'm a big supporter of that. Cognitive behavioral therapy, which is talk therapy. What my psychologist did is cognitive processing therapy, which is similar to CBT, but it's more focused on trauma. EMDR, which is, I've talked to many hundreds of people where this has been an amazing life-changing therapy for them. Havening, which is this technique where you stimulate your shoulders and certain sensors on your body that releases dopamine, which makes you feel better. Accelerated resolution therapy, sometimes this is abbreviated to art therapy. And this is, again, where you can change how you remember an event so you don't have the emotional response to it. Equine therapy, I'm not a horse guy, but I've been to equine therapy branches and I've seen horses react in amazing ways. And the healing properties that they have for people suffering from trauma are really amazing. Ketamine, MDMA, cannabinoids, psychedelic therapies, a lot of research, continued research in this field for trauma that's being very effective. Stellate ganglia block, they put this giant needle in your neck and they numb this nerve bundle and your symptoms of trauma are gone. Service dogs or service emus or service caterpillars, whatever animal therapy makes you feel better. For me, dogs are a big part. Reconsolidation of traumatic memories. This is similar to EMDR. I believe I'm not an expert on any of these, but it's in a way where you envision yourself as a movie screen. Your life is a movie. Art, music, fitness, yoga, acupuncture or Reiki if you feel that trauma is energy stored in the body. Transcranial magnetic stimulation. This is used for severe depression, where they essentially re-zap your brain and reconnect your frontal lobes with your amygdala. Diet, again, that's a big one for me and many other people I've talked to. Sauna and cold plunge, they do this in Finland. Every fire hall in Finland gets a sauna, new fire hall. Forest bathing, they do this in Japan, where they spend time in nature. We do that here, we call it ecotherapy. This is me and Dexter, forest bathing. So Dexter's a bulldog, and if any of you know what bulldogs are like, they do not walk 5 or 10K like I want to walk. So he gets a ride in his little cart and he loves it. And then we get judged by other dogs that walk by and owners and, why aren't you walking your dog? I read this book called Resilience, The Science of Mastering Life's Greatest Challenges by Dr. Southwick and Charney. And these gentlemen interviewed hundreds of people that probably should have died but didn't. And they were looking for common signs of resilience. And this is what they found out. They were optimistic. So they balanced positivity with realism. So they believed they were rock stars, but they realized that they also weren't bulletproof. They faced their fears. So when we avoid scary things, we become more scared. And when we face our fears, they become less frightening. 3, they had a moral compass. Developing a sense of right and wrong will help us guide us in difficult times and adjust to life after trauma. They practice spirituality. So being part of a group that strengthens your resolve is helpful in stressful times. They had social support. Friends and loved ones are key when life gets hard. 6, many of them had resilient role models, so positive role models to admire and negative role models to learn what not to do. They maintain physical fitness. So the stress of exercise helps us adapt to stress when we feel life challenges us. They had a strong brain, so they were lifelong learners. They were cognitively flexible, meaning that they could find many solutions to a problem. And they felt they had meaning in what they did. They felt they had a calling versus them having a job. So big part for me as a graduating counselor, I really want to focus on interpersonal relationship issues. I want to focus on men's issues specific to families and how trauma affects not just the person that's suffering, but family together. That's why I created this art piece of how the female officer in this situation, she's lost the capacity to fight for herself. And I really want to help that. Substance abuse is another area that I want to really help in. It's secondary to trauma. This is my favorite art piece, and it's also the darkest one. This image represents the act of suicide, where this paramedic isn't defending himself. He is literally being consumed by his trauma. This image I created also about suicide, where I felt suicide was like this cozy blanket that I can wrap myself around. And it just was this comforting thought. And that's how trauma had really affected my brain structure, where I saw suicide as a solution and my answer, but I didn't have the capacity to really understand what it meant. If you look at this picture with this paramedic and this angel, this is a father and son in real life. And you look in the top right-hand corner, this paramedic's trauma is screaming because he doesn't have the grip on that paramedic anymore because his paramedic is getting the help that he needs. So it doesn't have to be like the picture on the left. It can be like the picture on the right. Now, I want to talk a little bit about stigma. We think that stigma doesn't have teeth or stigma, let's smash the stigma. There was a firefighter in my area who died by suicide. The next day, I was in the hospital with my patient, and I would listen to other firefighters that I knew, and we all knew this guy, and they were saying things like, how could he do that to his family? He took the easy way out. So even in his death, he was being stigmatized, which is why I created this art piece, where his trauma is still yelling at him even after. And I think that's horrible. And I think a big part of that is the negative stigma around mental health and how people don't really understand what is going on in the mind of someone who's contemplating suicide. So luckily for me, I have this Rolodex of all these calls that I've created this artwork for. All these images have deep meaning in them. This is in Australia, in Melbourne, and we talked about a call that they did, and they wanted to do a shark attack. And I'm like, I'm from Alberta. I don't know what a shark attack looks like. So we talked about it. We staged it. We photographed it. But people would say, Dan, why are you still doing this work? Why did you stay in EMS so long if it almost killed you? Well, it's not all doom and gloom in emergency services. A lot of positive things. I loved my job. And I always tell people if they want to get into emergency services to do it. It was like going into the circus every day. I didn't know what was going to happen. The problem was I would take the circus home with me, which was a problem. The interaction I had with my patients was really special. And seeing people at vulnerable moments and being able to be there with them, the camaraderie that I felt and still feel when I travel around the world and interview and meet my peers is something that I really don't know I'll get anywhere else. And it's a wonderful part. This is in Australia. These firefighters forced me into their fire hall and made me eat Vegemite, and I knew that was them accepting me. This was in California. I was there last week where I met all these firefighters and talked to them, and we talked about mental health and did these pictures. And so it's great, that connection that I have. It's police officers in Australia. Here's some paramedics in Australia. This photo shoot was probably the most powerful photo shoot I've ever done. And with the family's permission, this is in Las Vegas. This was 30 days after the shooting in October where all those people died. And I asked them, do you still want to do this photo session? And they says, yes, absolutely. And this is the first time these are the emergency workers that were there. And this is probably the first time they were together in a non-emergency situation. And the togetherness and bonding was really incredible. With the family's permission, I included the sheriff there, Charlie, who died that day. And he's standing there with his fellow sheriffs to be a part of this portrait. So that's probably the most powerful images that I done. Same thing in New York. This is in Finland. All the girls look like supermodels. All these guys had these Viking beards that I was so jealous of. And I see this is called Torn, where I see when people have lost the capacity to really fight for themselves like I was in, where their peers or their family or their friends or people like here at this conference are fighting for them to support them. And I see that all the time. I get asked to do artwork for other areas that I haven't worked in, like this case for this surgical suite. So this is a team that was doing work on a friend of theirs who actually ended up dying, and they wanted my help with processing it through artwork. And these images really help them feel better, which is hard to comprehend if you don't really know what it's about. And same thing for corrections. I spent a lot of time in corrections facilities talking with corrections officers and hearing about the stresses that they feel, and I create as much artwork as I can. Same thing with communications. I got in trouble for a few reasons on this one. People thought it was an actual image that I took where this guy tried to kill himself by shooting himself, and he just shot his jaw off. And other things that women would say that you would never have your hair down on a call like this, but I don't know what the hair protocol is as a bald man, but these are two women in a super stressful situation that are doing an amazing job. And so I didn't change it. I thought this was a great picture for that. This is my mom in this picture. My mom does not like my artwork, or she doesn't get my artwork, let's say. And I'll create something and she'd say, damn, why is this so gross? Why is it so nasty? I'm like, Mom, it's not for you. But I made her come to this photo session for Stars Our Ambulance, and I wanted a senior citizen. So I tricked her to be in this picture, and she loved it. When she saw the ambulance and the helicopters and the pilots, she thought this is really cool. So she loves this picture. All right, we're at the end. I'm going to do a quick self-assessment. Well, you're going to do self-assessment. I'm going to ask you 9 questions and just answer yes or no. Over the past 2 weeks, have you been bothered by the following problems? 1, little interest or pleasure in doing things. 2, feeling down, depressed, or hopeless. 3, trouble falling or staying asleep or sleeping too much. 4, feeling tired or having little energy. 5, poor appetite or overeating. 6, feeling bad about yourself or that you are a failure, have let yourself or your family down. 7, trouble concentrating on things such as reading the newspaper or watching television. 8, moving or speaking so slowly that other people could have noticed, or the opposite, being so fidgety or restless that you have been moving around a lot more than usual. 9, thoughts that you would be better off dead or hurting yourself in some way. Now, these are questions I got from Heads Up Guys, which is an initiative that started at the University of British Columbia, and that's Heads Up Guys. You can scan that code to get there. So if you feel that as a man you don't feel safe in coming forward with how you're feeling, you don't feel that you can come forward with your family, or if you don't feel that you have the connections with your friends to come forward because of the stigma that you are perceiving, then you can go to online assessments, or a lot of the stuff that we've learned at this event that Mike has put on, lots of resources there. But here you can answer those questions, and based on what you answer, it will give you resources in your area that you can link up to. So it's another available resource for men specifically, or I guess it could be for anybody that maybe needs a little bit of help and support in getting the help that they need. When things were really bad for me, my sister told me that when one door closes, another one opens. And I said, Carrie, yes, I understand that. But then she said, but Daniel, no one tells you the hallway's on fire. And for the longest time, I was in that burning hallway and I was unable to see the exit. But remaining tragically optimistic and recognizing where I was, facing my fears, facing my trauma, but knowing that there was an exit there, I went out that door and am better person and way more. God, it's so emotional. It's hard to describe the profound change that the traumatic experiences that I have had that have affected my life in a positive way. I don't think if I had the option to go back, I would do it all over again. Honestly, even though it almost killed me, the effects it's had have been so profound for me. Thank you so much for listening to my story on my own personal experiences and my stories of post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth is not something new. I see it in my peers all the time. I see it in people all the time, so much that I have my own conference on it, and I invite people to come to share their stories of recovery, resilience, and post-traumatic growth, and then becoming these superheroes of people because of the traumatic experiences that they've had. So thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And I know, well, I'm a little bit late, but I don't know if we have maybe
we're all
5
good.
minutes.
We're all good. It's been a long few days. Daniel, thank you so much for being here. I am incredibly grateful. Friends, I know it's late, but I'm going to ask you to hang out for a few more minutes with us. We are going to wrap up our evening with a few songs from Alexander. If you've got questions, maybe drop them in the Q&A box, and we'll get them to Dan just as it's getting late. I'm going to share one quick story with you before I hand it over to Alexander, and then we will wrap up our night. I changed my t-shirt. I told you if you weren't here the last 2 days, I shared a little bit of my story. In 2015, my girlfriend was murdered by an ex-boyfriend who subsequently took his own life. And that was what set me down this path of looking at, rather than how do we build a better restraining order, maybe the conversation should be more about how do we prevent men from getting to that point in the first place. And Colleen and I used to have long, deep philosophical conversations all the time. And one of my favorite conversations was on the topic of talent. And I remember I asked her, I said, what is your talent? And she said, oh, that's easy. I make things beautiful, which she absolutely did. She was an artist, a photographer, a painter, a potter, and she just had a knack for finding the beauty in everything. And so she turned the question around. She said, well, what do you think your talent is? And I kind of hummed and hawed, and I said, I don't know. I've been successful by most standard measures, but I don't know that I have any particular talent. And so I said, what do you think my talent is? And she said, oh, that's easy. You make shit happen. And I went, oh, all right. As a business guy, I kind of like that. So there you had it. She made things beautiful. I made shit happen. Together, we were going to make beautiful shit happen. So on October 2nd of 2015, that day that she died, I vowed that I would do my best to continue to make beautiful shit happen in this world. And I can't tell all of you that are here, that have presented, that have shared your stories, that are about to share your stories, how grateful I am that we are all making beautiful shit happen in this world. And with that, friends, again, I will send out a follow-up email. We definitely want some feedback. Alexander, the floor is yours, brother. Daniel, thank you so much. And Alexander's going to play 2 or 3 songs for us, and then we will close out the evening. So I'm going to spotlight you, I think, and you're on, man.
All right. Thanks for asking me to play again. It's so great to be a part of an event like this, talking about men's mental health and getting rid of that stigma. It is hard to find a community of people who are more open to sharing these things, and well, we need it, definitely. Everyone who's a part of this, they know what it's like to experience trauma. We all have like different reasons for why it happens, but usually the symptoms come up and they're totally similar. And I was abused when I was younger, sexually abused, and that gave me a lot of trauma and a lot of difficulty in my youth and even my 20s. When I turned 30 this year, I was just so grateful to have all that over with, and I'm much better for it. I like your graph, Daniel, talking about the traumatic growth, and the trauma can bring you down, but the trauma does make you stronger. And mine is definitely like a squiggly graph too. I think most people's recovery goes that way. You just got to learn how to ride the waves, I think. That's the trick. And well, I have my ups and downs. When I was looking through your 9 questions, it's like, oh yes, that definitely happens in my life. So like you, Daniel, my art has been an amazing part of my recovery. It's helped me reframe things, and when we're in our brains, things get all so crazy, and putting a pen down on paper really is a release. So I've told people for years, my songwriting is a lot like journaling. And well, here's a couple of my journal entries. In the morning, I get a feeling when I'm staring at the ceiling, already defeated. There's got to be a reason to believe in me. And when I make it to the mirror, I don't know if who I'm looking at is really here. There's got to be a reason to believe in me. How do I let go of losing innocence? No one wants to know. Is it too intimate? When you're violated, things are complicated. I don't wanna be a victim anymore. I need a way to mend my soul, to be complete. To be complete. So in this lyric, I wanna be specific. I was sexually abused when I was just a kid, and maybe that's a little TMI for you. So now I'm in this difficult position where I keep going up before I get to really fix it. The trauma changes, but it's just another to-do. How do I let go of losing innocence? No one wants to know. Is it too intimate? When you're violated, things are complicated. I don't wanna be a victim anymore. Need a way to mend my soul, to be complete. How do I let go of losing innocence? No one wants to know. Is it too intimate? When you're violated, things are complicated. I don't wanna be a victim anymore. Need a way to mend my soul, to be complete. So Daniel, I like that message you talked about seeing your life more like a movie and being the hero of your story. So I actually wanted to play this song. I kind of had a set list figured out, but your message sort of inspired me to change that up. This one's called Runnin'. I've been running, 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 look at me go. I aim for the gold. I was nothing, nothing, nothing till I found out my life was my own. I just wanna be a man who found his peace before he got too bitter. 'Cause I know how it goes when you feel all alone and no one seems to care you're dying. I've been running, 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 look at me go. I aim for the gold. I was nothing, nothing, nothing till I found out my life was my own. Live a life I'd rather see played out on my TV, so now I have to be the hero. And even though I don't believe I got a lot to show, I can see my future shining. I've been running, 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 look at me go. I aim for the gold. I was nothing, nothing, nothing till I found out my life was my own. No, no, nothing, running, running, look at me go. I aim for the gold. I was nothing, nothing, nothing till I found out my life was my own. So I got one more song for you guys.
Yay!
And
So Doing these virtual, hey?
Yeah, it's so great. So I wanted to play cover. I've been a big fan of Linkin Park, and if you know their story, there's lots of pain and recovery in their songs. And this one really touches me. Normally, when I get home from work, I work a night shift. I get home at like 2 in the morning, and I'll just come downstairs and just play music for myself, and it's so therapeutic. This one definitely played a couple times. This is called Somewhere I Belong. When this began, I had nothing to say, and I'd get lost in the nothingness inside of me. I was confused, and I let it all out to find that I'm not the only person with these things in mind inside of me. All the vacancy the words reveal is the only real thing that I got left to feel. Nothing to lose, stuck, hollow and alone, and the fault is my own, and the fault is mine. I wanna heal, I wanna feel what I thought was never real. I wanna let go of the pain I felt so long. I wanna heal, I wanna feel like I'm close to something real. I wanna find something I've wanted all along. Somewhere I belong. And I got nothing to say. I can't believe I didn't fall right down on my face. I was confused, looking everywhere only to find that I'm not the way I had imagined it all in my mind. So what am I? What do I have in negativity? Cause I can't justify the way everyone is looking at me. Nothing to lose or gain, hollow and alone, and the fault is my own, and the fault is mine. Wanna heal, I wanna feel what I thought was never real. I wanna let go of the pain I felt so long. I wanna heal, I wanna feel like I'm close to something real. I wanna find something I've wanted all along. Somewhere I belong. I will never know myself until I do this on my own. I will never feel anything else until my wounds are healed. I will never be anything till I break away from me. I will break away and find myself today. I wanna heal, I wanna feel like I'm close to something real. I wanna find something I've wanted all along. I wanna heal, I wanna feel what I thought was never real. I wanna let go of the pain I felt so long. Somewhere I belong. Somewhere I belong.
Yeah.
Thank
What was
you.
that one called again?
That's Somewhere I Belong.
Somewhere I Belong.
Yeah, by Linkin Park. It's
I
a good
love
one. Whenever I'm feeling down or angry, I just go and play their records. I got an LP and I'll just blast it sometimes.
Nice. Where can folks find your music?
My wife and I play as Genesia, Jenesia. So our music is streamable everywhere. I got this long list. I've been compiling a list of like 30 of my songs. I finally gotta record them and release them. It'll happen.
Nice.
It'll happen. I got 2 little kids. One's 3, one's 1.5, so that's keeping me pretty busy.
Nice. Alexander, thank you so much for showing up. I just love that we got to bookend tonight with music. It's such a powerful anchor that for me, I try and grab a song for every adventure, every event that I go to, and I try and find one song to take away. So this will be that song for me for Love Letter to Men 2024.
Nice.
So thank you. Friends, anything you want to say before we wrap up, Alexander?
Well, looking at myself in the webcam, makes me think Daniel says you kind of look like your dog, and I'm a little bit of a poodle guy, I guess. Hey,
Are you actually a poodle guy?
I have a golden doodle, so there's a little bit of the golden retriever crazy side and the poodle. That's me.
There you
No,
go.
I am jealous of the hair. I'll give you that much.
I work in a welding shop, and a lot of guys, they don't have hair. One guy calls me pineapple head. There's a lot on top, and the sides are shaved, so.
Yeah, that looks cool, man. That's great.
Love it. All right, gentlemen, thank you again so much for your time, energy, heart, and presence. What an amazing 3 nights. Everybody that's still here, I cannot believe you're still here. This has been a long 3 days and a particularly long night tonight, but it's been fantastic. So once again, any feedback you've got for us as organizers, Mike at mikecameron.ca. I will be sending out a request for feedback, so we will have a survey. So for everybody that showed up, again, I hope you'll take a few minutes to give us some feedback, and any constructive criticism is more than welcome. Any suggestions? My hope is that next year we can do something in a big, big way and do it live. Tony says, thank you to all the presenters for their efforts. 1000%. Look at that. We had what, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 different presenters making it all happen. So Alexander says, thank you all. Alexander, I think you just sent that to us in the hosts chat. All right, friends, that's a wrap. I am going to go maybe grab a little hot tub and just breathe it all in. Good night, friends.